Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the key. The safe had been hidden behind an old painting for 11 years, and now, in the dim light of a guest room that used to be a servant's quarters, Marta the cleaning lady stood frozen, staring at a single folded document with a company seal she recognized instantly. It was the seal from her employer's office building, the one on the 40th floor. The one with the brass nameplate that read, Founder and Chairwoman. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it further. And that's when she saw the name. The same quiet old woman sleeping down the hall, the one she had taken in 3 nights ago with nothing but a suitcase and a torn cardigan, was not just anybody's forgotten mother-in-law. She was the reason the entire company existed. And what Marta was about to do with that piece of paper would end up freezing every single asset the family owned in less than 48 hours. But to understand how a 71-year-old woman ended up sleeping on a cleaning lady's pull-out couch instead of in her own son's mansion, we have to go back. Just 3 days. 3 days earlier, nobody in that house thought an old cardigan and a suitcase would end up changing everything. If a story like this moves you even a little, hit that like button right now. It costs nothing, but it tells me you believe people deserve better than this. And if you're new here, subscribe, because these are the stories that remind us who really deserves our respect. Eleanor Whitfield had lived in that house for 11 years. She kept to herself mostly. She watered the plants nobody else remembered existed. She left small gifts on birthdays that nobody thanked her for out loud. She never raised her voice, not once. Not even when she probably should have. Her son Daniel ran a logistics company that stretched across 3 states. He worked long hours, came home late, and trusted his wife Priscilla to manage the household the way she managed everything else, with total control. Priscilla had a vision board. Literally. It hung in her closet, covered in photos of home gyms, infrared saunas, and a wellness studio she'd seen on a design blog. There was just one problem. The only room in the house with the right lighting and square footage was Eleanor's. So one Tuesday morning, while Daniel was on a work trip, Priscilla walked into Eleanor's room with 2 moving boxes and a decision she'd already made without asking anyone. "You'll be more comfortable somewhere smaller," she said, not looking up from her phone. "This room just makes more sense for the gym." Eleanor didn't argue. She never did. She folded her sweaters the way she always folded them, slow and careful, like each one held a memory worth protecting. She packed 11 years into 2 boxes and a suitcase that still had an old airline tag from a trip she took before her husband passed. By 6 that evening, she was standing on the front porch with her belongings at her feet, and nowhere in particular to go. Marta found her there an hour later, while locking up after her shift. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She just saw an old woman sitting on a suitcase in the cold, and something in her chest wouldn't let her walk past it. "Come stay with me," Marta said, "just until things sort themselves out." Eleanor tried to refuse. Marta didn't let her. That night, in a small apartment that smelled like cinnamon tea and old books, Eleanor Whitfield slept in a stranger's guest room for the first time in her life, and Marta had no idea who she just welcomed through her door. Over the next 2 days, something quiet started happening. Eleanor helped fold laundry without being asked. She told stories about a company she once built from a garage, with 2 employees and the second-hand printer. Marta listened, mostly out of kindness, thinking they were just stories an old woman tells to pass the time. She didn't know it yet, but every single word was true. And on the 3rd night, while looking for a spare blanket in the hallway closet, Marta noticed a loose panel behind an old painting Eleanor had asked her to keep safe. Behind it was a small, dusty safe. Eleanor hadn't mentioned it. Not once. Marta hesitated for only a second before she reached for it, and what she found inside was about to turn everything Daniel and Priscilla thought they owned into something that was never fully theirs to begin with. Inside the safe were 3 things: a stack of original founding documents, a share certificate with a number so large Marta had to read it twice, and a single legal file labeled Voting Control Agreement signed 11 years ago on the day Daniel officially took over as CEO, Marta wasn't a lawyer, but she'd cleaned enough offices to recognize what mattered. She saw Eleanor's name at the top of every page, listed not as founder emeritus or some polite honorary title, but as the majority holder of voting shares. The real power had never actually left her hands. It had only ever been quietly, patiently, waiting. She sat with the file for a long time before she brought it to Eleanor. "Is this real?" Marta asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor looked at the paper like she'd been expecting this conversation for years. "I built that company with my husband," she said calmly. "When he passed, I let Daniel run it. Not own it, run it. I never told him the difference mattered, because I hoped he'd never need to know." "Why didn't you say something? When Priscilla put you out?" Eleanor's eyes stayed steady. "Because I wanted to see who they were, when they thought I had nothing left to give them." 2 days later, Daniel came home from his work trip to a locked front gate, a legal notice taped to the door, and 3 missed calls from the company's own attorney. Every asset tied to majority shareholder approval had been frozen, pending a formal review of recent changes in the primary residence and welfare of the controlling shareholder. Priscilla read the notice twice before she understood what it meant. Her name wasn't on a single page of it. Daniel drove straight to Marta's apartment because it was the only address anyone had for his mother now. He found Eleanor sitting at a small kitchen table, tea in hand, calm as ever. "Mom, what is this? What did you do?" Eleanor set her cup down slowly. "I didn't do anything, Daniel. I simply stopped pretending I had no say in what happens to what I built." "You could ruin us." "No," Eleanor said, her voice quiet but firm. "You did that yourself. The day you let someone throw me out onto the street and didn't think to ask where I'd end up." Daniel had no answer for that, because there wasn't one. It was Marta who finally spoke, standing by the doorway, arms crossed, no longer just the woman who cleaned their offices twice a week. "She had nowhere to go," Marta said. "You didn't even call to check." "Get up," Eleanor said gently to her son, nodding toward the empty chair across from her. "Sit down. We're going to talk about what kind of company you actually want to run and what kind of son you still have time to be." It took weeks, not days, for things to fully settle. The assets weren't unfrozen out of anger resolved overnight, but through a slower kind of accountability. Daniel personally rewrote the company's leadership structure, adding formal protections for his mother's role, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a real seat at the table. He started showing up to family dinners without his phone. Small thing. It mattered more than he expected. Priscilla's path was harder and slower. The wellness studio was never built. Instead, she spent months in something closer to reflection than punishment, eventually apologizing to Eleanor in person, not with excuses, but with an honest admission that she'd never once asked who Eleanor was, before deciding she didn't matter. Eleanor didn't move back into that house right away. She stayed with Marta a little longer. Not because she had to, but because, for the first time in years, she felt genuinely wanted somewhere. When she finally did return, it wasn't to reclaim a room. It was to rebuild a relationship, one dinner, one conversation at a time. And Marta, the woman who once just quietly cleaned offices and never expected anything in return, found herself with something she never could have planned for. Eleanor made her a permanent, formal advisor to a private family trust, not out of debt, but out of genuine respect for someone who showed her kindness with absolutely nothing to gain. Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove their worth to people who will never truly see it. And some people, quietly, without asking for anything, prove exactly who they are the moment it matters most. If this story reminded you that kindness is never wasted, even when no one's watching, type "I see you" in the comments if you believe the people who ask for nothing are usually the ones who deserve the most. Thank you for watching until the very end.